I really liked your questions. For the first part, whether companies should have more privacy settings, I don't think it's a matter of should necessarily. I think it'll be more commercially viable for them to include it. And I think that they're likely to, in a lot of cases, be aftermarket privacy things becoming available. There's actually this group right now that's suing for the right to repair our own devices because there's a lot of legal stuff about whether the devices are ours to edit and modify, or whether they still belong to the company and need to be left the way the company made them. And I think that depending on how that shakes out, that'll influence it a lot. And I mean, like, I hope that wearable devices do have more privacy settings available. And I hope that companies see that it's more commercially viable, but I don't think it should be a legal obligation, if the distinction there makes sense. As to how it would play out in looking at crimes, I think that anything that's GPS tagged will either make or break alibis. And I think that it's neither a good nor a bad thing, but kind of an inevitability. Like, we can already use phone GPS data in the same way. And, there was that whole thing where there was that Russian soldier who posted photos on Instagram from inside Ukraine when the Russians were totally not in Ukraine. And I think that that's a growing trend. And it's definitely, I don't know, I see it as a sort of a value neutral, but again, inevitable. As to whether I would get something implanted, I mean, I think it would be really cool, and I really like the idea of the patch things that won't need charging of any kind. But I wouldn't want to get anything implanted because glitches would then be, incredibly dire. Upgrades would be harder. Repairs would be harder. The whole thing about whether or not we own it would be harder. And I mean, the US already has a ton of problems with whether or not women own their own bodies, whether even without putting stuff in it that explicitly belongs to a different company. So yeah, a lot of really interesting questions.